On April 29th, I'm doing a free live webinar. It's a virtual session, and it's all about, you guessed it, being diagnosed with ADHD later in life. The webinar is called Now What? From Chaos to Clarity, Lessons from a Lifetime of Masking to Understand My ADHD. I'm going to cover what ADHD really looks like in adults and why so many are missed. I'll talk about the emotional roller coaster after diagnosis, from grief to relief, why ADHD isn't a superpower unless it is, why shame and burnout and masking show up and how to heal, practical strategies to support your brain, energy, and life. And I'm going to give you some next steps with helping you lead with more confidence and self-compassion. The Now What webinar will be free, but space is limited, and you can sign up right now at wisesquirrels.com/events, and I'll see you there soon. Welcome to Wise Squirrels, the podcast for late diagnosed adults with ADHD. I'm your host, Dave Delaney. I wanted to kick off today's episode by sharing some recent reviews from you. And if you haven't left a review for the podcast yet, I would sincerely appreciate this. You hear this on all the podcasts, the host groveling and begging for reviews. But the truth is that the reviews do help the podcast get found by other listeners. And my intention of Wise Squirrels is to help late diagnosed adults with ADHD, of course. So your reviews really do matter. And how you can help is by visiting Wise Squirrels wherever you listen to podcasts. Give it a star rating, leave your honest review, your feedback. That will help other people find the show. And also make sure you subscribe or follow the show, whatever the word is now. Following on Apple Podcasts, subscribing on Spotify and Amazon and so forth. I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I didn't realize that there are some international reviews of the podcast that I've missed recently. And I wanted to make sure to include these on the show. So first of all, there's Josie from Spain. Josie, if you need me to come to Spain, I'm more than happy to do that. I love Spain. She wrote, "It's a must listen for adult ADHD brains. I absolutely love ADHD Wise Squirrels. It's a perfect mix of insightful advice, real life experiences, and humor that makes learning about ADHD both enjoyable and relatable. Dave does a fantastic job of breaking down complex topics in a way that's easy to understand while also entertaining you and helping you or making you to enjoy every session, helping you enjoy every episode." Thank you, Josie. That's amazing. This next review is from So Pleasant from Portugal. "I can't believe I've got listeners in Spain and Portugal. Please invite me. I'm happy to come and visit you." I love Spain and Portugal. My family and I did a road trip several years ago now. We started in Barcelona and we drove all the way down to the Algarve down in Portugal and had the best time. And I've traveled Spain and Portugal back in my backpacking days as well. And absolutely love the people, the weather, the history, the food. So Pleasant wrote, "Loved it. 5 stars. Love the episode with Rick Green." Oh, who does not love Rick Green? Rick Green is the best. "I especially liked it when you guys talked about how Rick's son's ADHD diagnosis led to him realizing that he had it too. Such an interesting moment. It made me laugh because it's so relatable. Sometimes I'm half convinced I only find out about my own quirks when someone else points them out." So thank you, Dave. That's awesome. So thanks everybody for your reviews. Honestly, they do mean the world to me. Obviously, as I said, they help people discover the show, but really, a lot of times with podcasting, you're kind of putting things out in the world and hoping they're resonating with people. And it's reviews like this that really do help me understand that people are finding this helpful, entertaining, and so forth. So, and of course, thank you to everybody at Substack as well, our Substack subscribers. Some subscribe by paying just a few dollars a month, the cost of a coffee, and that's greatly appreciated because that money is reinvested into the podcast, and that helps me to keep going. And of course, you can subscribe to the Substack for free, and you can do all that. You'll find all the links at wisesquirrels.com or in the description. So thanks for that. And speaking of supporting Wise Squirrels, I would be remiss not to mention our friends at Inflow. Inflow is the #1 science-based app to help you manage your ADHD. Their awesome app was created by ADHD clinicians and psychologists, and their dedicated support system helps you understand your neurodivergent brain and helps you build lifelong skills and helps you get things done. Yesterday, I participated in a co-working session with Jenica, who was hosting that session within the Inflow app, which was a super cool way to body double and to hold yourself accountable to the work that you're doing. I've been working through the modules of Inflow like organization, so setting routines that stick and taking control of your calendar. That's been really helpful, and I'm excited that it's in module 1. There's additional modules. So module 2 is relationships. Module 3 is rejection sensitive dysphoria, RSD. Module 4 is time management. I'm really excited as I work through the app, going through the mini podcast episodes, the instructions, the interactions, the gamification that actually shows your progress. I'm really enjoying Inflow. I'm proud to have them as a paid sponsor of Wise Squirrels. They are really helping us. And the best way for you to do the same is to give it a try. Try the free ADHD traits quiz for yourself. If you go to wisesquirrels.com/inflow, give it a whirl and let me know what you think. I really do enjoy Inflow, and I'm very appreciative of their sponsorship and support of Wise Squirrels. And I hope you are too. Thanks. My guest today is Dr. Bryan Lee, a food scientist, food industry consultant, and author of the book 150 Food Science Questions Answered. Bryan received his PhD in food science from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he studied savory flavors. What I love about Bryan's journey is he actually got his PhD with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, so anything is possible. I'm excited about this conversation today, and you might even be hungry after listening.
I'm a food scientist. I earned my PhD in food science. Now, I spent the last 5 years consulting for food companies on various topics. Whether that's food safety or food formulation, basically as many things as I possibly can to keep myself from being bored.
Well, Bryan, this is I'm thrilled to have you here, and I did an outreach trying to find more air quotes, I say, high achievers who have ADHD, and certainly late diagnosed in some cases as well. And I know you were late diagnosed with ADHD. Tell me a little bit about that journey, and then we'll also obviously start getting hungry by talking about food a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so the basically the biggest way that it all came out was that my wife ended up taking a second career as a therapist. In our sort of late 20s. She went back to school, and then after she became a therapist, we moved up. We were living in Wisconsin. We moved to Washington, and I started doing my little food science consulting. And then my wife at some point had this funny idea, and she decided to give me an ADHD assessment. But I didn't know it was an assessment. I thought it was one of those fun quizzes that you do online. She just was like asking me questions and had her laptop open. I was like, he's like, what out of 1 out of 5, like how often do you, finish things that you start? And I'm like, no, I don't really do that, and I get like, and like all my scores are like extremely high. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Like I'm gonna get like a 50 out of 50. This is great. And then she's like, you have ADHD. Right? And I'm like, I'm at this point, I'm like 32, right? And I'm like, what? Like, what is that? How's that even possible? How did I get through it all my life without even knowing this? And then I went to a psychiatrist to do the full assessment, and then they're like, "Yeah, you do." And I'm
That's
like,
amazing. That's
"Oh
amazing.
God."
It's funny
Yeah.
too, because it's often our spouse who identifies it. My wife is a school teacher, and so of
Hmm.
course she deals with kids of all different
Of
neurotypes,
course.
and and so yeah, she had been telling me for years that I had ADHD. I the longer version, but I'll try to keep it short. But the because often I tell people, like, I was 50 when I got diagnosed a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
which is true.
Yeah.
And that's why I launched Wise Squirrels, of course, because I got hyper focused on the topic, and
Of course.
being a veteran podcaster and digital marketer, recovering marketer, I wanted to kind of share my journey. So,
Sure.
but it was actually 2015 or maybe 2016, I can't remember, where she had said it so many times that I actually went to go see my GP and my family doctor at that time. And he said, well, let me make an appointment for you with a psychiatrist or a psychiatrist, I think, to do a proper assessment. And so I did that.
Right.
And the thing that I remember, I saw him twice. And from those sessions, the feedback that I remember receiving was to stop giving my wife, stop sharing every crazy idea I have with my wife, because it's probably driving her nuts, and which was fair and true, right? um, and only to, like, because it was adding some stress on our relationship a bit, because I was always sharing these crazy ideas, and in her mind, I'm sure she was like, "Oh my God, like, just do something, like,
Sure.
and rather, share the share the ideas that are actually coming to fruition that I'm actually going to do, or I'm started already or something." And that was kind of the feedback I took from that, and that I had some anxiety, but that was it. And fast forward to 2020, no, excuse me, 20, whatever year it was, 2022. I was in a mastermind with two other entrepreneurs, one I know well, and the other I didn't know very well. Sure. And one day, the guy who I didn't know very well texted me out of the blue and said, "Hey, Dave, I think you have ADHD." Or he asked me, "Do you have ADHD?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Yeah, you do." Because he did.
Okay.
Right. And he's like, "You should go talk to your doctor." So I went to go talk to my doctor. This is turning into a long story. Sorry. I went to go talk to my doctor, and he fired up my charts and said, "Oh, yeah." And he did some assessments and stuff. And he said, "Yeah, it looks like you were diagnosed in 2015 or 16. And I was like,
but he didn't actually tell you.
well, I still don't know whether it was just some sort of cognitive dissonance or something, that, like, I received the information and I don't believe that would be the case, that I would just ignore that fact.
I could see that. Like, I could see it being like,
or maybe I wasn't listening when he told me. I don't know. Like, I'm not really sure. But and then yeah. So, and at that point, I was kind of, and it might have been my doctor's fault too. Like, he might have just had the information and forgot to tell me, or missed the information, or whatever. But at that point, I'm like, well, like 48, 50, well, like, or whatever the math is there. A couple years here at this stage in my life. I don't know. I'm not holding any grudges. I'm not upset about it.
Right.
It's just like, it is what it is. And
it is what it is.
And knowing's half the battle, G.I. Joe. So yeah. So tell me, so what did you do? Like, when you were diagnosed, properly diagnosed, like?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, as a scientist, I decided to read the research literature, and there's some really interesting things, or like people would do studies on people who had late ADHD diagnosis, and there's like this long, things like there's like a high incidence of dropouts, and like there's a high incidence of dissatisfaction with career. They'd have like 5-6 careers, and like there's all these. I was like, oh, that does sound about right.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that checks out. So, and so I just like went through my personal history, and I was like, that's why my teachers hated me, right? Like, in high school, like I would just interrupt. Like, that's a big problem, which is like just constantly interrupting and like making a lot of fuss and noise and like fidgeting. And I was like, oh, wow, that would have saved me a lot of heartache, right? Like, if I had just I'm not stupid. I'm not just like an annoying kid, right?
Right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
And you got your PhD, right? You said?
Yeah.
And this is before you were diagnosed?
Yes, this was before I was diagnosed.
Do you ever stop? Because one thing that I always like, one of the things that a question I often get is like, what is something you've learned since being diagnosed? And I always say, like, what I've learned is to give myself grace, like in day-to-day work and the stuff that I'm doing, because I always call it my operating system, right? Like, to understand your operating system is, knowledge is power in that way. But
sure.
But I was going to ask, do you ever stop to think like, oh my God, I got a PhD with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD. Like, that's huge, man. Like, you should really stop to celebrate that from time to time if you're not already.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think sometimes it's hard because I look back and I think, wow, I like put myself through like a lot of pain just because, there was like part of me, I was like, well, I'm just gonna get this done, even if like, I have to like create the most ridiculous systems to do it. Like, it's like, intuitively how you work, even if you don't have like a label for it. So the one thing that I learned was I gave myself a lot of, I told myself like, if I have to do it a way that makes sense for me, like I'll do it that way. So when I was doing my PhD, the one way that I got through it.
Hey, this is Dr. George Sachs, co-founder of Inflow, a proud sponsor of Wise Squirrels. If you have ADHD, you know how tough it can be to stay on top of, well, mostly everything. That's why we created Inflow, an app designed by expert clinicians and people with ADHD to help you understand your brain, build habits that actually stick, and feel less alone in the process. Get the support you need with Inflow. Head to wisesquirrels.com/inflow to check it out.
First of all, like my wife has like amazing executive function. I think she's like on the other side of the spectrum, right? So thank God, like otherwise I couldn't get through it. Like I would have just like left or dropped out. I was so bored.
Sorry to interrupt. How long have you been together, you and your wife?
We've been together, gosh, like 12 years. It's like,
so she was with you. You were seeing each other like at that time.
Yeah. We were married. So it was luckily. And so, I mean, the second thing was that I worked completely different from, my fellow graduate students. So I'd like have really weird hours. I would, I definitely was like, no, I am not working on weekends. Like that's like a big thing for at least science PhDs is like, you gotta work weekends. Like, and it's like, no, I can't. Like, I just need recovery time. Like, and so,
right.
And then like I was running, I was like meditating, I was like literally doing everything I could. I like poured everything out to like make sure I had like sort of all the resources mentally and emotionally to get through. But the other thing that I ended up doing was, the the procrastinating productivity combo where I would like set my dissertation aside and then I'd like do other like at one point I was like writing a book, right? I was writing like a whole other book and then I got that published because I was so bored with my dissertation.
You got it published too?
Yeah. I was like, oh, I gotta like get my brain to, relax like in one way and then like get it to work on the other. And somehow that worked. Like doing two things side by side was like,
so and what was the book on? What was the book?
It was on food science. It was mostly for like young adults. It was geared for that. It was like explanations about things that you do when you're cooking or you're in the kitchen and like, why do you do that? Like, what's the importance of, yeah.
That's really smart too, because like often because I've coached students before in the past and spoken as a guest speaker at colleges and universities and things. And, being a proponent of social media and digital marketing back before it all went evil,
Right.
I was always telling students, and I mean, some of this rings true still, but I was always telling students that like you should like start a blog, like buy your domain name, buy your
Yes.
name.com,
100%.
start a blog and or whatever you want to call it, whatever it's called these days, content management system.
Right.
Right. Whatever. But start writing blog posts, like short mini articles about the stuff you're learning in college, because if you share that, first of all, you're providing value to other people, which is always the essence of Web 2.0 kind of sense, right?
Sure.
But then you're also building your brand while you're in school because you're associating your name with the topics you're studying. So that's wise to do. But then in addition to that, like, yeah, you'll have that kind of expertise. So for example, like when I moved from Toronto, where I'm originally from, to Nashville, I didn't know anybody here. And I knew I wanted to work in technology and marketing and sort of those kind of wheelhouses. And so I created a blog on like Blogspot, you know, the Google's free blogging platform, called New Media Nashville, because it was called New Media back then before it was called social and digital and all that. New Media.
Yeah.
So I called it New Media Nashville. And what I started doing was blogging, writing articles. I was just researching the technology space in Nashville. And I would write articles about different people and what's happening and companies that are doing things here as like a little research tool. Also as a way to network, you know, as I actually arrived here or as I was, you know, when I was here, I could network with people. But I even created like little crummy business cards that were cheap that said New Media Nashville on them.
Nice.
And I just did this as a way to kind of brand myself, but not even so deliberate and strategic and sneaky, just to get informed about it. So I love that you did a book is like next level. That's huge.
Yeah, I remember at one point, I think my professor was like, when I published it, he was like, "That's what you've been doing?" Like, and I think he even like, he almost failed me because he was like so surprised that like I was spending so much time doing this other stuff. So, but I was like, you know what? This is what I have to do. Like, I accepted like, this is how I get things done. And this is how my brain is wired. So I'm grateful even before I learned, I was like, that I was able to do all these things because, and then we'll talk about this later at some point, all that like actually ended up being really important for my business, like being able to do all those things that I did.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Well, let's talk, actually, I will get back into that, but let's talk a little bit about the business. So tell me about the business of designing the future of food.
Yeah. So the short and sweet is I couldn't find a job. So I'm like, I knew there was something wrong, or at least I don't work very well. And this is the other thing I found in the research about ADHD, which is like, there's a tendency to not really look up to authority, right? Or like you don't have like that part of it. Yeah, exactly. So it's like just do it right, like do it. And so I'd always be like, hey, like, I don't think this is the right way to do it, because I would always spend like random time studying other things. And then I'd come back and be like, I discovered this thing. And so I had an internship where that happened. I was working at like a big cheese factory, and I was so bored. Like I would like sit in the corner of like this like fermenting cheese vat. And
this is in Wisconsin before.
This is in Wisconsin. This is in Wisconsin. Yeah. And I would just like sit there and get my notepad. I'd be like, okay, this is what you can do. This is what happens. Like, you know, I was like doing these weird calculations. And I would show them to management, and they'd be like obviously like I've never worked a job, so I didn't know that you gotta like take things up. There's bureaucracy. And I'm like, but this is stupid. Like the way you guys are doing it doesn't make any sense. Like you were losing a lot of money, right? And then so once that internship was over, and then I got my PhD, again, it was in COVID, so I was applying, and I was like, this is really boring. Like, like applying to jobs is extremely boring. And I didn't want to put myself in that position again where I was sitting in the corner and, you know, manager's like, where the hell is this guy? Right? Like, why is he disappearing all the time? So I was like, you know, probably there's someone that's good, that will appreciate what I did, right? So I just like,
Yes.
opened up the little website with my little name on it, and I started just being like, I got really hyper fixated on this idea of like, okay, maybe I'll just like email a ton of people, like I'll email all these companies and see if anyone's interested.
Yeah.
And then I just like went through this whole iteration cycle of like, okay, pitch, 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 okay, refine, pitch, 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 refine. And eventually like my hit rate got really high, and I was able to like connect with all these different startups. And then they were like, yeah, we'd love to work with you on X, Y, and Z. And I was like, oh, good. And then of course that got boring. so,
Yeah.
so then I decided to start doing like full on content, marketing and like connecting with journalists and that sort of thing. And then that became a whole thing. And then I was like, oh, this works really well. Like I don't have to actually put a lot of energy on this. So I
that's
landed on
interesting.
that.
Yeah. So you're building your brand. Sorry to interrupt. You're building your brand,
Yeah.
maybe even unknowingly by reaching out to journalists and media to talk about food and your area of expertise, right?
Yep, exactly. And that actually came out of just like, again, being bored. That's clear the main theme here. And then I spent a lot of time on Reddit, like way too much on Reddit. I started like helping build like a whole food science group, and like it went from like 10,000 members to like 50,000 members. I was like, okay, like clearly there's like optimization problems, and I was figuring out like there's all these little different areas that I can just like hyper fixate on and people really appreciate.
Yeah.
And I just had to find my niche, right? So I just started like getting into all these different things, like advising like investors and like being like just grabbing all the data information and presenting it. And then I was talking to different startups, and then at some point I was like, oh, the big issue is formulating, right? Like people have an issue with formulating. So I've never formulated in my life, but I was like, okay, give me the problem. And then I was like, figure out how to like, and then I got really lazy. So I like built all these calculators that would automate all of my issues. So I was like, okay, I got that figured out. So then, now that's its own running service.
What's an example? What's an example of that? I'll
get an example. So there's like, there's this whole space of sodas where, people were really excited about making sure that soda is low calorie, and like, first it started off being like, artificial sweeteners, and people were like, oh, we want natural. So then you have to like monk fruit and stevia and so on and so forth. The problem is that when you make that transition, there's so many different nuances to like the bitterness, to like how the sweetness gets changes as far as like when you change the ingredient composition. And then like where you supply it, right? Like there's all these different issues. So turns out someone has already solved all those issues, but it's just like giant statistical nightmare. So no one wants to read that, right? So I just like grabbed all the information from that research paper, and then I made a spreadsheet and was like, okay, like, and then all you have to do is just plug in a bunch of numbers like that you would know, like, oh, this is how sweet I want it. I want it as sweet as Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has like 39 grams of sucrose. So what's the equivalent amount of sucrose in like high sweetener? So you just plug that all in. And then there's like viscosity junk, and then like color and all this stuff. So it's kind of like, I'm like the world's greatest cheater, right? Like basically, like in high school, this would never fly. But this is like what I ended up doing was like, basically copy and pasting a lot of things that has already been done. But like, why would you do that again? Right? Like, why would you go through the heartache of actually, you don't want to like sit there spending hours and hours of time, like going through every single possible iteration. And people do this. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Like, people have done this already. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, so for me, it's like, I can basically what has happened. Like my overhead's really low, because I don't have to do a lot of the long and boring and arduous work. I just calculate everything, and then I do it once or twice and I get it done. So it's like, it's like a really weird niche that I discovered because I was lazy, or lazy with air quotes, and B, like really bored. So
Are they so in that situation where you created that spreadsheet calculator, were you already on like payroll at a company, or were you like as an advisor doing this, or were you doing it just kind of for fun and just seeing
I
what
was
you
doing it for
could?
fun. Yeah.
So how did you connect the fun piece to like actually something you could sell?
That's like a really weird thing that happens, which is like once I work on something, somehow it gets into my brain so much that I start talking to people who have this problem. I don't really know how that happens, like whether that just means like, okay, I get people who see my website and they come on and they talk to me and we have a little meeting. And then I just like say, hey, I've got the spreadsheet that I'm working on, right? Like that may be part of it. And the other part might just be like, because I'm so fixated on this particular thing that I get really passionate about, I seek out those particular types of clients. Like I'll look through the news, and there'll be like a startup that's been working on like savory something. So I have like another calculator that works on savory flavors. And so I'll work with them, or I'll reach out, because I'm like, hey, like this kind of works. Like I'm like, procrastinating. So let's make some money procrastinating.
That's awesome. I mean, that's brilliant. I like it. And I almost was asking that, like, it was like asking for a friend. Because yeah, I mean, I'm sort of guilty of that too, in a way. Like even at Future Forth, in my, kind of core business, I built two calculators, which are super simple.
Right.
With the help of ChatGPT, of course, because I always say I'm not a developer, but I know enough CSS and HTML to break things. But I created two calculators. One is my 10X conference coaching calculator, which basically tells you, and this is from my own experience and something that I do is, when you sponsor or you pay to sponsor or exhibit at a conference, you're spending a ton of money. You don't really even realize probably how much you're spending, and you don't know how to measure the ROI of that. And so I have strategies for that, and I help people do that. And so the calculator is sort of a lead gen to show you like exactly how much you make or lose. And then you can click to contact me for like a free session. The other thing is, because I've done a lot of work in sort of internal communication strategies across departments and things. I have a calculator based off Sherm's calculation of how much it will cost to replace a person when they quit. And so it's a very basic calculator, but it gives you sort of insights into like, oh, I didn't realize it was going to cost like $30,000 to replace someone that's $60,000.
Right.
Yeah. So kind of as sort of lead generators or whatever, but they are like, legitimate tools. But the thing you created sounds brilliant. Yeah, that sounds super cool. So take it a step back here for a minute. And your PhD is in food science, is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so why food science? Like, what got you to that point?
Ooh.
Were you just in the grocery store, like, why are these limes so green? Or like,
I mean, that does happen. Like I'll go to the grocery store and think that, yeah. So that's not.
You go to the grocery store just to brainstorm, like just to walk around. You don't even have to buy anything.
Yeah. I mean, I actually sometimes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Like it'll be like how it's actually my happy place. Like actually, I don't know how this happened, but like when I was in high school, when I'd like get stressed out or I'd be bored, I'd walk to the nearby Trader Joe's and I would just like stare. I was like that weird kid, right? Like I'm sure the management was like, why is this kid always showing up? He gets like one thing, right? Like, but I just really loved, I was like, what, how do they get here? Like, how does this food get here? And I feel like no one really asked that question when I was growing up. And I was just always so like, okay, there's got to be so many problems, like it kept consuming me. But I never thought about food as like a career. I didn't know anything about food science growing up. I was just really good at chemistry. I was just like, again, like I was making fireworks or like, I had like a little lab that I built because I was really tired of doing homework. I was like, I was like, this is stupid. Like, I might as well just like do the thing that it says it's doing. And like, I got in a lot of trouble because of my chemistry tutor. Like, why are you like bringing hydrochloric acid to school? Right. Like, I was like, you're the chemist. Like,
Yeah. You
you
tell
tell
me.
me. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So anyway,
I remember I used to buy when I was a kid. This is funny. I forgot about this. I used to buy saltpeter.
Saltpeter. Yeah, it's so hard to get nowadays. Like, but yes.
Yeah, I used to buy it and just like light it on fire.
Light on fire.
Was it salt or sugar that you mix it with? I can't remember.
So you mix it with sugar, right?
Sugar,
yeah, and you'd make like little smoke bombs. 100%. And I love doing them.
And when I bought it, because for those, for people who don't know, like saltpeter is used to I think it's to hold an erection in like horses or something like that. It was.
Oh, there's so many random things. It's that. It used to be a fertilizer. You would also like use it to kill stumps. Like you have to go like pretty far to figure out that saltpeter is in this stuff. Like because historically it would just tell you, but now there's all these regulations because kids would inevitably burn themselves.
Right. Yeah. I mean, when I was a kid, I had dating myself here. I had a BBS, a bulletin board system before, like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. And so I would call other computers, and one of the most popular things you would download is the Anarchist Cookbook.
Oh my gosh, 100%.
And it had like all these recipes for all sorts of like cool, interesting things. Back in the day before, like, kids were like shooting up schools and God knows what, like, obviously not to obviously that's a major problem.
I know.
But it's back when like you were just innocent enough to like, you wanted to create a smoke bomb. That's cool. Like,
hey, that's cool.
Yeah. You're not like, you're not doing anything, nefarious. You're not trying to hurt people or anything.
Right.
Yeah. So I always wondered, like, when I bought this saltpeter as a kid, like, because my understanding was it's something to do with like erection, like keeping horses from getting erections so that they or giving them erection. I don't know. It's like something to do with cattle fertility or
it's all sorts of
I'm sure they're like, what the hell? Like, why is this guy buying so much saltpeter? Clearly, I'm in downtown Toronto. I clearly do not own horses. Anyway, but that's interesting. So, and then so you took that interest and. Yeah, what is it? Talk a little bit about the actual what you're doing now, like designing the future of food. So, like, what's a typical engagement like with a client? Like, what are they looking to solve?
Sure. I mean, here I'll give an example. Like, so I work not so much anymore, but I used to work a lot in the sort of plant-based space. So I was helping design a lot of like. Meat analogs. So, like plant-based burgers, plant-based, things like Impossible Foods and Beyond Burger. And so one of the core challenges there is like, where are you going to get your meat flavor from? Right. Like, so you have to source it from some plant-based combination. So there's a lot of research literature on that. But the problem is like, if you're a company, especially if you're a startup company, you don't have access to that. Like no one's going to pay for like all this research. And it's also just really hard to navigate. So I just became like kind of this broker essentially of like research knowledge. I like to think of myself as like either a translator or like this third party, because I don't feel like I don't do a lot to the data. But now I look back, I realize I actually do when I'm, but I thought I didn't. So, I'd package it in such a way that was really easy for the founders or the executives to like, look at that, feel confident in that data because it came from like a legitimate source, and then, use that to build, their flavor system. Right. So it was just like, for me, it was just a way of organizing all these thoughts because I was really familiar with the research literature because that was part of my dissertation. So I could navigate it really easily. And I also like had hundreds of papers that, I had like annotated and like had all these like different relationships between each of them. But then I would just summarize it. And so that, Joe Schmo could like look at it and be like, oh, that's what it is. Okay. So I'll just save myself thousands of hours and then
Yeah.
plug it into my production system. So
This very much this gets into like a lot of what I've been preaching over the years and what I've done myself with digital marketing, right? Where you have an area of interest, and so you create sort of a content or content marketing strategy, if you will, or call it whatever you want. That's kind of what it's called these days, but these names change. But almost in a Web 2.0 way of just putting it out there and like sharing what you're learning, and then allowing sort of an inbound way where customers or clients or whomever find you because they're Googling, how do I make fake meat taste like real meat? And because you've written a blog post that sort of summarizes how to do it, a lot of the times this is like, gets right back to when I was consulting and helping, companies. I still do some of it, helping companies with this specific task of inbound and building their brands and things. They would always be hesitant to share like what's in the sausage. Not that you're going to share like everything, but if you are solving the problem or you're at least communicating that you know enough about it, then chances are they're going to reach out to you when, it's almost like David Merman Scott wrote a book years ago called New Rules of Marketing and PR. He coined the term newsjacking, which was like,
interesting.
You follow breaking news stories related to your industry. And as soon as like a news story breaks that like there's a massive food recall for like a product. Yeah. If you jump on that and write a really smart article or blog post about it, journalists are scrambling to find sources to talk to about it. Exactly. And therefore they come to you, because if they just talk to like, lobbyists or advocates or their own PR companies, it's kind of biased, but for you could answer these questions in a way that's more informative for the public. So
that's that. I didn't realize there was a term for that, but that's exactly what I'd been doing. Like, it's just, there's a news cycle. The latest two of them, well, besides all the FDA stuff, I actually don't get too much into that because it's so contentious. But the big ones were there's a recall of listeria, and it was in a baby food. And what I ended up doing was, there was a lot of these women who were pregnant who had all these question marks, and this is all on Reddit, right? So I went down to like this whole rabbit hole of like the pregnancy or like pregnant woman groups, and I just wrote posts, and I was like, look, as a food scientist, this is how you calculate how your risk is for listeria. And then, I would I basically do what I normally do in my consulting, which is like, okay, so you have the amount you're eating. So there's a certain concentration of listeria, but this is how much listeria you need in order to like get sick, right? So, and this is the probability of getting like, an illness for your baby, right? So there was all these like things, which, from an intellectual standpoint was really fascinating because it's not something I normally do. And then all these people were like pouring out of the woodwork. We're like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe like someone has finally explained it in a way that like makes sense and like is easy to understand. I was like, oh, interesting. Like, let me think about that. Because it was so cool to actually have like an impact, right? Like, to actually know like, oh, I'm helping relieve a lot of the stress that a lot of these women have. And they're struggling with. So it was awesome. Really cool. It was really cool. That's great.
Yeah. Because you're helping to kind of answer the questions people have. I mean, it's almost like some of these, I was later to the financial, not that I'm any expert, but like I was later to the world of finance as far as like just personal wealth and like,
sure.
And retirement. And so many Americans and others don't have a retirement fund at all. And it's because, and this is kind of gist I learned from all the books and things that I read when I was like hyper focused on this topic, was that like, it's almost, I can't say with certainty, but it's almost like specifically, it's almost intentionally confusing for people, so that they don't.
Right.
When in actuality, it's actually quite simple. It's like diversified fund, put the money in, always put the money in, never look at it, never
just
take
wait,
it out.
just wait,
Yeah. And diversified, like across the whole stock market. Don't look at it. Vanguard. Not a sponsor. But it's almost that idea of like you're saying, like kind of dumbing it down in a sense so that people can actually understand, and then they can they can use that information. That's fascinating. Do you feel like how ADHD has helped you? Well, let me ask you this, actually. One of the curses of ADHD, as there are several, one of the curses is this this notion that when the novelty runs off something, excuse me, when the novelty runs out, like we might have the perfect thing, the perfect system, the perfect solution, the perfect whatever, analog, digital, but suddenly the novelty just runs out for some reason, and then we're like, I don't want to do it this way anymore. Do you run into that? And
I'm running into it right now. That absolutely happens all the time. And it I've come to accept it, like it's just gonna happen.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is this is actually something that's sort of like an ongoing discovery for me, which is if I just give it to someone else to do, it's actually really nice, because then I can automate it, and then I can just focus on the thing I'm really interested in. And then like over a year, it takes like maybe 6 months or a year, I might come back to it, and then I might have like a second like round of hyperfixation, and then now like make it even better, right? Like, and so like over time, as long as I have like everything kind of juggling, like little plates, I can like come back to things. Like there's sort of like a second win or even the third win, and projects get moved along. And it took me a while to realize this, but if I have like 5 to 7 projects going on at the same time, it's way easier for me to get it all done. I just have to know, like, okay, at some point they'll all get done, but they all have to get done at the same time versus I can't do it literally. And my wife is driven mad by this. She's like, why don't you just finish it? I'm like, no, this is not how my brain works. So I will like get it 70% of the way done, get bored, switch to another project, get that 70%. And then once I get through the whole cycle, I come back, finish the last 30% because I finally...
That is so, I mean, I've been working on this new book for ages, and that's a great example of that. So like do you have a system, or do you have a way to get back to these other things that you've abandoned or put on hold, or like, how do you do that?
Yeah, I basically have the client, like, at some point they'll ping me. It's funny.
Well, there's a lot to be said with like I always say, like, with writing this new book, I'm planning on probably, self-funding it or something. But my first book I wrote before I was diagnosed, I had a contractual, like I had a contract, I had an advance, I had legal dates, I had deliverables too. And so, yeah, if somebody's paying you, that is kind of that proverbial gun to the head kind of thing.
Sure.
What about the stuff that is there stuff that you're doing that is not, you don't have a contractor or a client saying, when are we going to see this?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the
passion projects or whatever.
Yeah. The passion projects. Yeah. So like that one always gets hard because like they'll just kind of languish on the wayside. I'm figuring out a new system, which is basically I take other smart people, like, and I just go, here, have some stuff, like, have some things that I've been doing. And if someone is like, oh, that's really cool, they'll get into it. And, obviously, if they're not neurodivergent, they'll have much better executive function and be able to move it along. And I've noticed that this happens a lot. Like, I can't code for anything, right? Like I don't know how to code. So, but some guy was like, I will I'm, he's like some AI expert. I will code for free. And it's like really smart guy. And
Yeah.
I was like, okay, have some data. Would
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
some data? And then he built like this whole, HTML thing for me in like
That's
half a
cool.
day. Yeah. And I was like, oh, thanks. Appreciate that. And then that allowed me to like move it forward in other ways. So I've learned to like collaborate with people where like there'll be a point where I get stuck and I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm either this isn't doing it for me. My dopamine is shot, or like I'm not interested in this anymore.
Yeah.
And I'll because everything is open source. I don't hold anything back. I basically am like, either you pay me for my time, or deliverable, or I just give it out for free if I really don't find any way to monetize it. And then someone eventually picks it up,
Mm.
within my network, and they're like, "Oh, this is so cool! Like, I'm just gonna work on this." I'm like, "Cool," and then I can put like I can. I'll put their name on it, of course, but I can stamp my
Yeah.
name on it, and I'm like, it got done, like, yay!
That's super cool. Like, and it very much is like sort of this Web 2.0 mindset of, I keep saying Web 2.0, but really like, when the internet was more open and,
Yeah,
you know, when we could just use it to build community and to just
yeah.
share what we have, open source movement, all that
Mhm.
stuff, where people would collaborate. And it was really like kind of a kumbaya kind of
Right,
situation, right? Where,
right.
and nowadays where everybody's sort of like holding their thing and, trying to figure out how to make money from it. Hey, you
Sure,
can
sure.
subscribe to my things, or whatever. Everything's subscription based now.
Right.
So yeah, it's interesting. So like just putting it out there and you were saying Reddit was your is that sort of your go-to? Are you using Reddit under your name or do you have an anonymous name? Because I so often with Reddit, my own experience is using Reddit. It's always so often it's anonymous.
So I broke the mold at some point and was extremely authentic about who I am.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
I just like told everyone everything about myself, like
Yeah.
all the ups and downs. Like I kind of thought of it sort of like the sort of back when there's like Zynga,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
like, the old style blog systems.
Yeah.
And I really didn't hold back. So, and it turns out that, while the anonymity is a huge asset if that's what's important for you. If
Yeah.
you counter that theme, people really, really trust you because it's like, well, you didn't have to like be so personable, but if you are, um, people really gravitate towards that. So I found like I would do like ask me anything's, or I would do all these posts about what I've been up to. And it was really easy to build up this community. And at this point, what happens is like if anyone asks a question about like, oh, I would like a consultant, or I'm working on this project, users who know me really well on that group, they'll ping me. They'll be like, Bryan, like there's a project here. Like, and they'll like recommend me. Like people will like send me to my website,
Wow.
just because they know like I'm not, my whole spiel isn't making money, right? Like for me,
Yeah.
like I'm giving out so much information and I do it in such a personal way. Like I'm basically like this friend slash professor type persona that like shows up and like answers these questions that people really trust that I can deliver. So and I'm not trying to like scam people out of money.
Yeah.
So that I think that's what has sort of happened organically. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
actually, I was just spending a lot of time on Reddit because, again, I didn't want to write my dissertation / I didn't
Right.
want to apply to jobs. But it's,
Yeah.
over, God, I feel like it's been 7 years. It's been a long time, but over
Yeah.
7 years, like it's created this sort of feedback loop finally. Like I can finally tell my wife, like, yeah, the reason why I'm spending so much time on
Yeah,
Reddit is
yeah.
because it's part of my business now, right? Like this is my strategy. But it
Right,
was
right.
never started off that way. Like I was
Yeah, that
just
was
like,
me with Twitter back in the day. Like,
oh my gosh, right?
I mean,
When it
like
was Twitter.
there's like 100,000 tweets I think I did. Like I
Oh my
started using
gosh.
Twitter in '07, in February '07, and
Wow.
that's why it pains me so much. I mean,
I
that I had
know.
to abandon it, but yeah, because you kind of lose that community. And of course, with Twitter, I was under my actual name, and you
Right.
could,
Right.
yeah. So I was like an open book, and still am. But I find a lot of where I'm doing my most at least rewarding work on a personal level, maybe not in the bank account, but is this? It's Wise Squirrels, because
Sure.
I
Sure.
love I love sharing what I'm learning, featuring smart people like yourself, and yeah, just trying to inspire people, but also remove stigmas associated with ADHD, and also, this statistic from, Dr. Russell Barkley about, with undiagnosed and untreated ADHD, life expectancy can be up to 13 years less. And
13. Whoa.
up to 13,
Oh,
yeah. And when I
I have to
learned
read
that,
that paper.
yeah,
Yeesh.
if you go to wisesquirrels.com/life, you'll find that there. Because
Okay.
I added it there. And it's just such, it's, yeah. So what I'm trying to do is get more people to get get tested and get the
Mm-hmm.
treatment they need
Mm-hmm.
if they do have ADHD, so that, yeah, they can just live a longer, better life.
Right.
And I think
Right. Right.
knowing, as I said, like knowing our operating systems and giving yourself grace is key to that. And also, like, understanding, like with the heritability rate of, it's like 70-80%. So the
Oh,
chances
wow.
are, yeah. So the chances are, like, if you have a child, one of those children, possibly more, could have or likely have ADHD. But it also goes the other way, meaning that, like, one of your parents probably also has ADHD, and that can start to help with, because we deal with a lot of ADHDers, especially later diagnosed, have dealt with a lot of trauma in their lives.
Yeah.
Even the statistic of, like, by 10 years old, you've heard like 20,000 negative things from
Mm-hmm.
parents,
Mm-hmm.
teachers, whomever. That could kick your butt on a psychological level, certainly. And so, but for me, like, now I kind of understand, because both my parents, one is, still with me, not in Nashville, thank God. I hope she's not listening. Love you, Mom. I really do. You're great.
Just in small doses.
Stay in Toronto, please, and I'll come see you, I promise. But yeah, understanding that, like, there's a high likeliness that one of your parents probably,
Yeah.
or both maybe, have ADHD too. So you start to, like, you can become more empathetic, more forgiving as well, because of that. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I've actually, my wife has wondered if my mom, who isn't with me anymore, but
yeah,
she would have had ADHD, because she was so anxious, and then, like, she would
yeah,
always be doing so many things, and it's like, huh. But then she would get, like, really irritable, and, like, she
yeah,
would, like, need a lot of downtime. So it's like there's, like, all these things where, like, I need that, and then I'm like, oh, but that's one of those things that's in the questionnaire, like,
yeah.
when. So that's really interesting. I didn't know about the heritability, though. I didn't know it was that
Yeah. It's
high.
pretty high. Yeah. It's like, I think, and I always say on the show, I'm not a doctor, nor do I play on the internet. But yeah, it's somewhere around like 75-80%, something like that.
That's
And I
wild.
think gender plays a part of that too. I think
Mm-hmm.
one or the other is maybe a little higher.
Sure, sure, sure.
I don't remember the specifics of that, but yeah.
Very interesting.
Pretty fascinating. Well, this has been awesome, Bryan. Is there anything I didn't ask you, or anything you wanna share? Or
No. That's been great.
yeah,
I really appreciate being able to share my little ADHD journey with you,
yeah.
Dave.
Yeah.
I really do hope that it does help people, because it's a lot of it's a lot of heartache. I would say, like, be able to go through life and like wonder, like, well, I'm a little different, but I don't know why, right? And like, and then you finally realize, and you're like, oh, that's like a lot of decades that I could have. Well,
Right.
and it's not. Sometimes you're like, you just want to have the choice, right? Sometimes I had the choice of medicating myself, and I was like, I don't really want to because I take the Ritalin or
Yeah.
that sort of thing, and I was like, this isn't working for me. I'm very creative without it. Like I can do a lot of different things without it. So, um, but I know now, and I know like those
Yeah.
those processes that I go through, the habits that I've developed, like those are good ones. Like I actually, it might not be the same for everyone else, but
Mhm.
like those are the things that I've worked through my own life experience to gain.
Yes.
But like it's like validating to know, like, yes, other people have the same exact pathway.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I always think of it as that, like, and there's this line of like, if you think too much of the past, it can lead
Yeah.
to depression, and if you think too
Oh
much of the
yeah.
future, it can lead to
Absolutely.
anxiety. And so, this idea of being present and being mindful of that, and I have a
Yeah.
meditation practice, and I'm a big believer in mindfulness, especially for ADHDers.
Right.
But also thinking like, well, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now had I known when I was much younger, and I probably wouldn't have met my wife, certainly,
Right.
and I wouldn't have had
Right.
kids. And so, and
Yep.
yeah, I mean, life is not without challenges like everybody's. Everybody has challenges. But I think, it wouldn't be the life, like had you been diagnosed earlier, you may not have received your PhD. You might not have
Right.
for whatever reasons. Right. So, and
Right.
your wife and all this stuff. So I think,
Absolutely.
yeah. So I try not to dwell on the past too much. There is a guided meditation I did a while back that I loved. That was really an interesting exercise that actually ties back to the work that you do, which is this idea of like, as you are eating, like let's say you're eating a carrot,
Yep.
to chew it slowly, like really slowly, and chew it like all the way down to like, to the mush, rather than chewing it like 2 times and swallowing it or whatever. Maybe a choke hazard, but chewing on your carrot. And as you're chewing on that carrot, think about the history of the carrot, where it came from, right? So well, it came from the grocery store, obviously. Well, it came from my fridge, and then it came from the grocery store. Right. How did it get to the grocery store? Well, it came to the grocery store in a truck. And where did the truck came from? A warehouse. And imagine the people involved, like the truck driver and the grocery clerk who sold it to you. And you go all the way back to, okay, and it arrived on a plane from wherever. And there were like, all the way back to like somebody actually planted that seed to grow the carrot plant, right? Or maybe even the people that helped like develop the seed or whatever, in a non-GMO way, of course. But it's an interesting exercise to do, because you really, it helps you be more mindful in the moment. It helps you be more like thankful also to like all the people that are involved with the fact that you are so lucky to be eating this carrot, while like there's plenty of people in the world who would kill for a carrot right now, or an apple, or, replace
absolutely
with whatever. Yeah. How can people get a hold of you and learn more about what you do and all that good stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. If just type in Google Bryan Quoc, so BryanQuocle. You'll find me. I'm also rebranding my business. So I moved to a little town called Mendocino in California. And so now my business is called Mendocino Food Consulting. So MendocinoFoodConsulting.com. That's where you can find me and all my little adventures.
Nice. That's awesome. That's great. Well, it's a beautiful part of the world. So, well, thanks, Bryan. This has been a lot of fun. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I really appreciate the time. Thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks for tuning in to Wise Squirrels. Please make sure you follow the show so you never miss an episode. If you enjoyed the show, leave a review, please, and visit wisesquirrels.com/love for bonus content, audio comments that you can leave, membership information, free coaching, sponsorship details, booking information, and much more. Drop by wisesquirrels.com/love. Check out the link in the episode description below and explore now. Thanks again for listening.
Hey, this is Dr. George Sachs, co-founder of Inflow, a proud sponsor of Wise Squirrels. If you have ADHD, you know how tough it can be to stay on top of, mostly everything. That's why we created Inflow, an app designed by expert clinicians and people with ADHD to help you understand your brain, build habits that actually stick, and feel less alone in the process. Get the support you need with Inflow. Head to wisesquirrels.com/inflow to check it out.